So let's create a Redux demo application. I will say npx create react app Redux demo. Alright, so now the application is created. Let's also install few required packages as I mentioned in the previous session. So we need the Redux and React Redux. Fine, so our application is now ready to work with Redux. The very first thing I want to implement is I want to create a folder named components, which will have three separate files: the purchase component, the cart component, and the total component. I have just copied the CSS which we already had in the context API application, so that I'm placing here. In the context API, we did not have the purchase component separately, but here I am putting it. Now let's configure the purchase component. That will have some JSX. We'll have the division. The class name we are going to apply is the custom division. Inside this, because we have the drop down, and in which we will have the option. Now, as long as filling the drop down is concerned, we do not have the global data here. So what I will do, I will just create the local array of object at the moment. So I'm going to paste the data in this. Later on, this data will be shifted to the global store, but here we keep it local. And let's write some coding which will loop through this data and display the purchase component. So here I am attaching the code which loops through the products using the map method, and every option is filled with the product name and product price. Remember that at the moment the data is defined locally, and that's what we are going to do initially. We do not want it to be global, so we are just setting up the environment. Let's just import the purchase component in app.js. So I will go to app.js first and will remove the predefined code which we had when we created the React application. So from header to header, I'm going to remove everything. And then I want to include the purchase component. So let me export the purchase component first. Let me also write the cart component. And here I'll say export the cart component with a default. And with the total also, I'm going to do the same thing. Alright, so basic structure of the components is ready. I also want to define the cart here. So I'll say cart, and we'll have an array. And here again we'll have the division where the class name is custom division. And I'll just copy this section and put it in the total in the same way, because there will be a total value. So instead of this, I'll say total, and that will have initially 0, and the total will be displayed inside this component. Cart, let me just correct this. This has to be small. It's a different variable. It's an array. It's a constant, in fact. Now let me also give some title to all the components. So initially, if there is no data, we see some message. So this is the purchase component. This is going to be the cart component, and this is going to be total component. Alright, let's see the first output here. I want to show the purchase component. That's the first thing I want. And there will be an import for the purchase component. So I'll say purchase from the respective path. Then I want to import the cart component, and also I want to import the total component. So now we have imported all the components, and that's what I want here. So the second component I want is the cart component and the total component. Let's save this and we run the application just to check what is the output. Alright, so now you see that we have the titles and the data filled, but again the data is not globally available. It is local state defined inside the purchase component. Let's also put an HR after every title in the purchase, in the cart component, and in the total component. Let's check the output. Alright, so we have an HR. I would also like to add the list item here in the cart component and total also. We'll fix the data and we try to show it. So let's do that. So later on when we convert it into the global state, that will make more sense. So in the total component, we display the total inside H2 and we have the total here. So this 0 is displayed. Let's check the output. Yeah, so 0 is there. Now let's add some data to cart component, right? So we put a loop and we do that. So inside the cart, there will be an unordered list and this cart will have the product and the price. That's what we are adding. So let me fix the data here. I'll say product name, Apple, and price. I'll say $10. And let's also add another record. Let me say orange and we say price 20 for example. And let's check the output now. Alright, so now every component has the local data defined. The cart is defined here, total is defined here, and the product data filled in the drop down. Now in the next lecture, we are going to define the state global. So first we'll begin with the purchase component.